September 19, 1940, Warsaw, Poland. Nazi soldiers are grabbing civilians off the streets. 2,000 people will be arrested today. Most are running, hiding, begging to be let go. But one man walks toward the soldiers. He makes eye contact. He slows down. He wants them to see him. His name is Witold Pilecki, and he's about to do something no human being has done before or since. He's going to voluntarily enter Auschwitz. Not as a guard, as a prisoner. Think about that for a second. This Polish cavalry officer, husband, father of 2 kids who don't know where their daddy is going, is choosing hell. But here's what makes this story impossible to forget. He'll spend 947 days inside that death camp. He'll watch tens of thousands of people die. He'll build a secret army right under the noses of the SS. He'll smuggle out the first detailed reports of the Holocaust to the Allies. He'll escape, and the world will do absolutely nothing. That's not even the worst part. The worst part is how this story ends. Because the man who survived Auschwitz, who escaped the Nazis, who fought in the Warsaw Uprising, who did everything right, won't be killed by Germans. He'll be executed by his own countrymen, shot in the back of the head in a prison basement, his body thrown into an unmarked grave that still hasn't been found. How does a hero become an enemy of the state? Why did they need him erased from history for 40 years? And what did he know that was so dangerous? To understand why Pilecki walked into that roundup, you need to understand where he came from. Born in 1901 in a frozen town called Olonets, deep inside the Russian Empire, 700 miles from Poland. His family wasn't there by choice. His grandfather had fought in the Polish Uprising of 1863. The punishment? Exile. They stripped his family of everything, their land, their wealth, their future, and deported them to Siberia. Pilecki grew up hearing stories about sacrifice, about ancestors who gave everything for a country that didn't even exist anymore. Poland had been carved up by empires over a century earlier. It was a ghost nation, a memory. But in 1918, something miraculous happened. World War I ended, the empires collapsed, and Poland was reborn. Pilecki was 17. He didn't celebrate. He grabbed a rifle. Within months, he's fighting Germans in Vilnius. By 19, he's fighting Soviets trying to swallow the new nation. By 20, he's already served in 2 wars. Then came peace, and Pilecki did something unexpected. He became boring, married a school teacher named Maria, had 2 kids, Andrei and Zofia, ran the family farm, painted watercolors, wrote poetry. For almost 20 years, he lived a quiet life, a farmer, a father, a patriot waiting for a call he hoped would never come. On September 1st, 1939, it came. Germany invaded from the west. The Soviets invaded from the east. Poland was crushed in weeks. Pilecki could have fled. Many officers escaped to France, to Britain, to anywhere that wasn't occupied territory. He stayed in Warsaw, helped found the secret Polish Resistance Army, one of the first resistance movements in Europe. They gathered intelligence, sabotaged German operations, waited for the moment to strike back. Then the rumors started. The Germans had built a camp near a town called Auschwitz. They called it Auschwitz. Polish prisoners were being sent there, political opponents, intellectuals, resistance fighters. None of them came back. But here's what made the Polish underground nervous. They didn't know what was happening inside. Was it a prison, a work camp, something worse? They needed someone on the inside, someone to gather intelligence, someone to organize resistance among the prisoners, someone to tell the world. The commander looked around the room. Everyone knew what this mission meant. Whoever went in might never come out. Pilecki raised his hand. He had a wife, 2 children. He was 39 years old. He'd already served in 2 wars. He had every excuse to stay silent, but he understood something the others didn't. If nobody went in, the world would never know. And if the world never knew, nothing would stop it. His commanders gave him a fake identity, Tomasz Serafiński, a tanner from Warsaw, no military background, no resistance connections. On September 19, 1940, Pilecki said goodbye to his wife. He told her something strange. "Don't try to buy my freedom. Don't try to rescue me. I'm going somewhere important." She didn't understand. She wouldn't understand for years. Then he walked onto the street and let the Germans take him. But before I tell you what happened when those transport doors opened, if you're loving this incredible true story, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these untold pieces of history. Trust me, what comes next will blow your mind. The transport took 2 days. No food, no water, no explanation. They beat the prisoners with rubber batons at the detention center, then loaded them onto trains. When the doors opened at Auschwitz, Pilecki stepped into a different world. He later wrote, "I bade farewell to everything I had hitherto known on this earth, and entered something seemingly no longer of it." Here's what Auschwitz looked like in September 1940. It wasn't yet the industrial death factory it would become. The gas chambers hadn't been built. The mass transports of Jews hadn't started. It was primarily a concentration camp for Polish political prisoners, but it was already hell. Prisoners were beaten for looking at guards, beaten for not looking at guards, beaten for walking too slow, beaten for walking too fast. They worked from dawn till dark, digging, carrying, building. If you collapsed, you were shot. The food was barely enough to survive. Watery soup, stale bread, enough calories to keep you alive and working, but not enough to keep you healthy. The average life expectancy was 6 weeks. Pilecki was given prisoner number 4859. They shaved his head, gave him striped clothes, took everything that made him human. Most men would have focused on survival, on keeping their heads down, on making it through each day. Pilecki started recruiting the same week he arrived. Building a resistance network inside a concentration camp sounds impossible. It was. The camp was filled with informants, prisoners who traded information for food, for easier work assignments, for one more day of life. The SS watched everything. One wrong word meant execution, not just for you, for everyone connected to you. And yet, Pilecki did it anyway. His system was brilliant. He organized recruits into cells of 5. Each cell knew only its immediate contact. If someone was caught and interrogated, they could only reveal a handful of others. The network would survive. He recruited carefully. A shared glance during roll call, a whispered conversation during work detail, a test of loyalty before any real information was shared. One wrong choice and everyone would die. By early 1941, his network had a name, Związek Organizacji Wojskowej, the Union of Military Organizations. Hundreds of members spread across every part of the camp. They had men in the kitchens who diverted extra food to starving prisoners, men in the hospital who smuggled medicine and hid sick inmates from selection, men in the records office who copied transport lists, men in the warehouses who knew where weapons were stored. Each small act of resistance was a victory. Each day a prisoner survived was a defeat for the Nazis. But Pilecki's main mission wasn't sabotage, it was information. He needed to tell the outside world what was happening. He developed multiple methods. Prisoners who were released memorized entire reports and delivered them orally to contacts in Warsaw. Civilian workers who entered the camp were recruited as couriers. Messages were hidden in laundry, in food deliveries, in the clothing of corpses being transported for burial. One released prisoner memorized Pilecki's entire first report, walked out of Auschwitz with the document in his head, and recited it word for word to resistance contacts. By October 1940, just 1 month after arriving, Pilecki's first report reached Warsaw. Then it went to London, to the Polish government in exile, to British intelligence, to the Allies. The world was being told. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. The world didn't want to listen. Throughout 1941 and 1942, Pilecki watched Auschwitz transform into something unprecedented in human history. New facilities were built at a nearby site called Birkenau. gas chambers, crematoria, buildings designed for one purpose: industrial-scale murder. The first mass transports of Jews arrived, trains pulling up to a platform, SS doctors waiting at the ramp. With a gesture of their hand, they sorted the living from the dead, left or right, work or gas chamber, life or death in a single second. The elderly went right, the sick went right, the children went right. Right meant death within hours. Most people sent to Auschwitz never became prisoners. They never received numbers. They were killed the same day they arrived, their bodies burned, their possessions sorted and shipped to Germany. Pilecki documented everything. He learned the crematoria could burn 8,000 bodies per day. He learned the SS had developed a system for efficient murder. He learned this wasn't random cruelty, it was planned, industrial, a machine for eliminating an entire people. He sent report after report begging for action, begging for bombs, begging for anything. One report said the prisoners begged the Polish government, for the love of God, bombard the camp. Should they die in the attack, it would be a relief given the conditions. Think about that. Prisoners asking to be bombed. That's how bad it was. The reports reached London, they reached Washington, they reached every Allied government, and then something happened that Pilecki never expected. Nothing. No bombs fell, no rescue mission came, no public condemnation was issued. The world's most powerful nations received proof of the greatest crime in human history, detailed evidence from someone inside the camp itself, and they filed it away. The Allies later claimed bombing Auschwitz was too dangerous, too deep in enemy territory. The precision wasn't possible. But here's what makes that excuse fall apart. In 1944, American bombers flew directly over Auschwitz. They bombed industrial targets just miles away. They had aerial photographs of the gas chambers, of the crematoria, of the trains arriving daily with thousands of victims. They saw everything. They chose not to act. An SS guard told arriving prisoners something chilling. However this war may end, we have won the war against you. None of you will be left to bear witness. But even if someone survives, the world will not believe him. Pilecki was determined to prove him wrong, but he was about to learn an even harder truth. The world believing him wasn't the problem. The world not caring was. Here's what survival looked like. Pilecki worked in the fields in winter without a coat. His fingers cracked and bled from cold. His wooden clogs gave no protection against the frozen ground. He insulated the crematorium. He could hear the machinery running behind him. He could smell what it was burning. He kept working because stopping meant death. He carried corpses day after day, bodies stacked like firewood, faces he recognized from the barracks. He caught pneumonia, then typhus. Each illness should have killed him. The camp hospital wasn't a place for healing, it was a selection waiting to happen. The SS came regularly. Anyone too sick to work was sent to the gas chambers. But Pilecki had his network. Members in the medical staff hidden during selections, falsified his records, smuggled him medicine, kept him alive when the system was designed to kill him. The average prisoner lasted 6 weeks. Pilecki lasted 947 days. During that time, his network grew. They stole weapons, a pistol here, ammunition there, hidden in places the SS would never search. They sabotaged equipment, machines broke down, production quotas weren't met. Small acts of resistance that saved lives. They even assassinated SS officers. They made deaths look like accidents, food poisoning, equipment failures, mysterious illnesses. And they built something impossible, a radio transmitter. Parts smuggled in over months, hidden in food deliveries, assembled in secret, tested in whispers. For months in 1942, messages went directly from inside Auschwitz to the Polish underground. The world's most secure death camp was leaking information in real time. Pilecki was ready for action. His network was ready. All they needed was the signal. It never came. By early 1943, Pilecki knew he had to get out. The Gestapo was closing in. Key network members had been identified and eliminated. Pilecki's own cover was compromised. If he stayed, he would be captured, interrogated, killed. Worse, under interrogation, he might reveal the entire network. But escaping Auschwitz was nearly impossible. Of roughly 800 attempts during the camp's existence, fewer than 150 succeeded. Those caught were hanged publicly as a warning. Pilecki developed a plan. He arranged a transfer to the camp bakery located outside the main fence. Two trusted members, Jan Redzej and Edward Ciesielski, were transferred with him. On the night of April 26, 1943, Easter Monday, they made their move. They cut the telephone and alarm wires. They used a duplicate key they'd secretly made over months. A guard confronted them. They overpowered them. Then they ran. Pilecki described it later. Shots were fired behind us. How fast we were running, it is hard to describe. We were tearing the air into rags by quick movements of our hands. They ran into darkness, crossed the Vistula River, traveled 100 kilometers through Nazi territory, moved at night, hid during day, helped by Polish civilians who risked everything to shelter them. After a week, they reached Home Army contacts. Pilecki was free. He had spent 2.5 years in hell. He had built a resistance network inside a death camp. He had smuggled out evidence of genocide. Now he could finally convince the world to act. At least, that's what he thought. August 1943, Warsaw. Pilecki walked into Home Army headquarters with everything they needed. 100 pages of detailed reports, maps of the camp, guard schedules, weapon locations, a complete plan for liberation. His network was ready inside, he told them. Hundreds of armed men waiting. If the Home Army attacked from outside, the prisoners would rise up. They could overwhelm the guards, destroy the murder facilities, free thousands. The commanders listened carefully. Then they said no. The attack was unrealistic, they explained. They didn't have enough troops, didn't have enough weapons. Even if they captured the camp, they couldn't evacuate the prisoners. The Germans would simply recapture it and kill everyone. Pilecki argued. He pleaded. He described what he had seen. The gas chambers, the crematoria, the trains arriving daily. People dying by the thousands every single day. It didn't matter. The military reality was against him. An attack on Auschwitz would weaken resistance operations elsewhere. The likely failure would cost more lives than it saved. They were probably right, but being right didn't make it easier. Pilecki had gone to hell and back. He had spent 947 days documenting the greatest crime in human history. He had risked everything to get this information out, and the response was, "We can't help." The Allies wouldn't bomb, the Home Army wouldn't attack. The world knew exactly what was happening, and nobody would do anything about it. Pilecki could have given up then, could have found a quiet place to hide until the war ended. He had already done more than anyone could ask. Instead, he picked up a rifle, because there was one more fight left. August 1st, 1944, the Warsaw Uprising. The Polish Home Army attempts to liberate the capital before the advancing Soviet forces arrive. They want Poland to free itself, to prevent another occupation. Pilecki joins immediately, despite everything he's endured, despite having no obligation to fight, despite knowing the odds. He commands units in some of the heaviest combat, street by street, building by building, fighting German tanks with rifles and homemade grenades. For 63 days, the Poles hold out. The Soviets advance to the outskirts of Warsaw. They can see the fighting from across the river. They stop, they watch, they wait, while the Germans crush the Polish resistance. 200,000 civilians die. The city is systematically destroyed, building by building, block by block. Stalin wants the Polish resistance eliminated. Let the Nazis do the dirty work. Pilecki survives somehow. He's wounded, keeps fighting, survives again. When the uprising collapses, he surrenders with the other fighters, ends up in a German POW camp, waits out the final months of the war. In April 1945, American forces liberate the camp. The war is over. Pilecki is free. But Poland isn't. The Soviets have taken control. The government in exile in London is ignored. A communist puppet regime rules Warsaw.
and former resistance fighters, the very people who fought the Nazis, are now enemies of the state. Pilecki could have stayed in the West, could have lived safely in Britain or America, could have written his memoirs and grown old. Instead, he volunteers for one more mission, the most dangerous one yet. Late 1945, Pilecki slips back into communist Poland under a false identity. His mission? Gather intelligence on the new regime, document communist atrocities, maintain contact with anti-communist resistance networks. He knows what this means. The communists are hunting former Home Army members, arresting them, torturing them, executing them. He goes anyway.
For 18 months, he operates in the shadows, changes jobs constantly, moves from apartment to apartment, sends reports to London through secret couriers. He documents arrests, executions, political repression, the machinery of totalitarianism being built in his homeland. His commanders warn him multiple times, "Your cover is blown, leave Poland now." But his wife is there, his children are there. He can't bring himself to abandon them. On May 8, 1947, exactly 2 years after Germany's surrender, the communist secret police arrest Witold Pilecki. And here's the cruel irony. The same government that ignored his reports about Auschwitz, the same allies who refused to bomb the camp, the same world that looked away while millions died, now that same world will look away again while the communists destroy the man who tried to save everyone. The brutal interrogations lasted for months. Pilecki later told his wife something devastating. Auschwitz was nothing compared to this. Think about that. A man who spent 947 days in a death camp, who watched tens of thousands die, who was beaten, starved, worked to exhaustion, and he said the communist interrogations were worse. The Nazis had been brutal but impersonal. They were torturing a number, a prisoner, an enemy. The communists were his own countrymen, speaking his language, torturing him for loving Poland too much. They wanted names, everyone in his network, every contact, every courier, every resistance member still operating. He gave them nothing. Despite weeks of interrogation, despite sleep deprivation, despite methods designed to break any human being, Pilecki protected his people. March 3, 1948, the trial begins. It's a show trial. The outcome was decided before it started. Pilecki is charged with espionage, working for foreign intelligence, planning to assassinate communist officials. The evidence is fabricated, extracted through forced confessions, contradicted by basic facts. Pilecki isn't allowed to testify in his own defense. No witnesses speak for him. His lawyer can barely argue. The judges aren't judges, they're party officials following orders. On March 15th, the verdict comes. Guilty on all counts. Death sentence. Pilecki writes a letter to the communist president asking for mercy. So does his wife. So does his lawyer. The president rejects them all. But here's what happened in that courtroom that the communists couldn't suppress. When they asked Pilecki for his final statement, he stood straight, looked at his accusers, and said, "I've been trying to live my life so that in the hour of my death, I would rather feel joy than fear." He wasn't afraid of them. He wasn't broken. After everything they'd done, he was still the same man who walked into that Nazi roundup 8 years earlier, still willing to die for what he believed. May 25, 1948, 9:30 p.m. Witold Pilecki is led to the basement of Mokotów prison in Warsaw. A staff sergeant they call the Butcher of Mokotów is waiting. Pilecki's last words, "Long live free Poland." He's executed with a single shot to the back of the head, the same method the Soviets perfected at Katyn when they murdered 22,000 Polish officers. He's 47 years old. His body is thrown into an unmarked grave. The location is kept secret.
The communist regime erases him from history. For the next 40 years, his name cannot be spoken in Poland. His story cannot be told. His sacrifice cannot be acknowledged. His wife works as a cleaning lady in an orphanage. His children grow up as undesirables, the family of an enemy of the state. They don't learn the full truth about their father until the 1990s. His grave still hasn't been found. The man who survived the impossible has no final resting place, just a story that was almost lost forever. But now you know it, and that's exactly what Pilecki wanted, for the world to remember, for the truth to survive, for his sacrifice to mean something. So, here's my question for you. What would you have done in Pilecki's position? Would you have walked into that roundup? Would you have stayed silent to protect your family, or spoken up knowing the cost? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story gave you chills, smash that like button and share this with someone who loves history. These are the stories that deserve to be told. See you in the next one.